My name's Terry Dezwarte. I own Pinball Life. We are a pinball parts manufacturing and distribution company.
My name's Steve Ritchie. I'm a game designer and I've been doing it for 42 years.
My name is DenTandt and service tech, do home repairs, sales.
My name is Mike Gaspar. People who go all the way back to Fort Cold RGP would know me as Wolfie. And in pinball, I am an enthusiast, I am a collector, and I'm just sort of your all-around pinball geek.
My name is Brad Czernik, and I've been a collector for the last 20 years.
My name is Mike Schudel. I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I primarily collect machines and repair machines.
I started playing pinball when I was about 5 years old. My dad took me to a place called Playland at the beach in San Francisco.
8:30 in the morning before class, I could turn them on and play pinball. And so the one that I always went to first was Funhouse, which insisted every morning on calling me Bucko. And that's how I started my day.
And it was one dime was 2 games, 5 balls per game. So you got 10 balls for 10 cents. Lasted about a minute.
I started playing pinball when I was probably about 10 years old. We had a relative of ours that had a machine in their basement, and I remember when I would go over there, our family would visit. The first thing I would do is go right down the basement and play pinball. I would play that till my mom told me it was time to leave.
It became pretty obvious to any pinball player that if you were going to keep playing games that were in good shape, you were going to have to start buying them. So about 2000, 2001, I bought my first game.
You know, can you buy these? You know, it's like, yeah, people buy these and put them in their houses all the time. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And you need to have a pinball machine in my house. So my wife and I talked about it a little bit and decided about what we wanted to spend for a pinball machine. And
I guess you could say pinball became an addiction for me, where it's just like, I played, and eventually I came to like the conclusion, it's like, I'm gonna have to own one of these things, and eventually I got to owning a Twilight Zone that I took out of an arcade.
okay, so the biggest change as far as pinball since I've started, when I first started collecting machines, there wasn't a whole lot of parts available. There was no aftermarket parts available. Basically, all there was out there was NOS parts, or parts that you know, people had stockpiled in their house, or when Williams closed down, grabbed before they threw them in the dumpster. So one of the biggest changes since I've started is just the number of reproduction parts that are available now for games that people can buy to fix up their old games and get them working again. And within the past 5 years, that's been one of the biggest things that I've noticed, is the amount of new games, the homebrew games, these you know, small companies that are starting up building games now that I never saw before.
Well, I guess the slow resurgence is a big change. The hobby has certainly gotten to be more of a rich man's sport. I mean, when I got into it, you were picking up games for under $1,000 and fixing them up and selling them for maybe a little over $1,000. And I think now the hobby is way more focused on new product, new games, than it was when I got into the hobby. And to me, that's the biggest change. It's not this sort of grassroots, oh, we're all finding games in barns and cleaning out the rat's nest and restoring them, and you know, it's all about, you know, preservation of the, you know, hobby and the games that you love. Now it's about, here's my $8,000, plug it in, play it, it better be perfect, or I'll whine on Pinside about it.
Well, lots of things are different. I mean, we have many new electronic advances. single-digit scores to alphanumeric displays. On high speed, we had an alphanumeric display, and the machine could communicate things that you needed to hit or whatever. Go for the jackpot. Where's that? And you'd look down and it would light up. So, and then the dot matrix display. A lot of things have changed, but some things never going to change.
I would say the last 5 years has been the number of people that have gotten into the market, the homeowners and purchasers that weren't there before, the folks that will be willing to buy a brand new machine at $5,000 and go put it in their basement, put it in their man cave, whatever the case may be. In the last 5 years, again, sort of like with the parts, has gone up exponentially. The amount of interest in, especially in people that are younger getting into the market, has just, again, it's kind of been off the charts, especially the last 3 or 4 years, where you have titles that have enticed them into it. New pinball machines like AC/DC or Metallica or something like that, where again you might think it would be an older crowd, but it really isn't. It's that crowd that's anywhere between 25 and 40 years old has really seen a huge jump, and I know that from starting in '99 is that I have and still continue to deal with a lot of people that are, again, from, you'd say, anywhere from 40 to 60 years old. So in that early stages when I got involved in it, you didn't see a lot of younger people involved due to them simply not knowing about the machines, the cost of machines, or just how to get into it. Where now with the internet, with availability of all this information, people can say, hey, I saw this Metallica at a bar last weekend, I wonder how much one of those costs. You jump on the internet, you find out it's made by Stern Pinball, you find a distributor in your area, and 2 days later you can order a pinball machine. It's changed quite a bit with the console market and the home video game ability from computer workstations, and obviously the evolution of things such as the Xbox, the PlayStation, and items like that. Whereas the pinball is a completely different device in the fact that it's mechanical and you never have that same game twice. If you're playing something again on a console or even on a arcade video game, you can replicate the experience where you simply won't have that with a pinball machine.
Prior to college, it was arcade machines. Because I remember being a kid at Wisconsin Dells, and that's where I first discovered the game Pac-Man. And from there, it went on to all the classic video games you would hear. But about the time that I entered college, video games were starting to change more into these side-scroller fighting games, and you were getting the multiplayer, 4-player things. And what happened is you had a pattern develop. Every video game was starting to imitate these things. And then Mortal Kombat came out, and you had all the Mortal Kombat knockoffs like the Street Fighter and the Killer Instinct, and they became very repetitive. So after you played a few of those, it's like, okay, it's more of the same thing. The pinball games on the same time as I was getting into that, I was able to both go back in time and play older games that I missed when I wasn't into it, and at the same time the new titles were coming out. They were all diverse, different themes, different kind of games, different style games, and I eventually started getting geeked out and picking up which designers worked on which games, and even though I didn't know their names, I could tell it was done by a particular person, because it's like, well, these two play similarly, and these two also have things in common, so there must be something going on there. So that's when you start picking out which games and styles you like. So it was basically what I discovered in video games. Now that I got bored with the repetition, I was rediscovering now on the pinball side.
Why don't I collect arcade machines, and why do I mostly have pinball machines? Even growing up, I played more video games growing up. When I went to the arcades, I saw there was pinball machines there, but I was more like everybody else was into the arcade games. You get into the patterns, you start to learn the patterns of the games, and you start to become good. With pinball, it's a lot different. There's no pattern to it. Every game is completely different. Where an arcade game, you learn different patterns. And when I first started off, everything was the arcade game, and pinball. Never really played any pinball because I thought it was too difficult. And interesting that, now I collect pinball machines and not arcade machines, and I actually like the hardness, the randomness that pinball has to offer, and never really wanted to own an arcade game. And because I like pinball so much, an arcade game takes up the space of a pinball machine. So that's probably primarily one of the reasons why I don't have any arcade games. And what I dislike about is all the modifications people are doing to their machines. It's all the LEDs, all the decals, all the toys that they add to their games, the shaker motors, and they're basically dressing up their machine. And it doesn't make the game any different. It just makes it look different. It gives it maybe more personality, I guess. But I like the originality of the machines, and I know some people do it because it helps their machine as far as the LEDs, less heat, less power consumption. But I like the old school and just the way it came out of the factory. That's just how I am.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything in particular that I dislike. It's changed a lot. The money has, for used titles has gone up significantly because of the introduction of new money and new collectors, new interested parties. So that's been tough to deal with. And so, I guess dislike is is a fairly strong term. But what's difficult for me is when I see a machine that I could have bought, 10, and again, it's a long time ago, but 10 years ago for $900, now being $2,900, it's tough to conceptualize that and deal with that because you don't necessarily believe that machine is worth over 3 times what it was 10 years ago. In that last 10 years, has it improved any? Has the technology improved any? Has it got new this, that, or the other? No, it's still as old as what it was, but it's much like the collector car market in the sense that you realize that muscle car from 1970 likely isn't going to depreciate in value because there's going to be less and less of them, less and less nice versions and copies of them. So you're going to have to pay in order to involve yourself in the community and in the market. So that's probably I would say the biggest piece that's difficult for me, not necessarily a dislike, but is the money.
What do I like about pinball in 2015 would be the constant inventions of items, the LCDs in the back boxes, again the computer in the game.
I like what I really like is I think that pinball has really exploded recently, and the number of young kids that are now getting into it. I mean, there's an older base of pinball players, but there's also now their kids see what their dads do or their moms do as far as competitive pinball or collecting, and want to be a part of it as well. So whether it's being in the competition or collecting machines or fixing machines, there seems to be young kids, as young as 12 years old, either playing competitively or fixing machines or buying machines. I mean, every facet of whether it's collecting or playing or repairing, I see a lot of kids doing it, and I think that's really great.
And then what do you like about pinball in 2015?
I would say, a culmination of some of those things we've touched on in terms of the availability of parts, the number of new titles that are being created. It seems to be that, the current manufacturers, and there's only a handful, but those current manufacturers are listening to the market demands and listening to their client base, listening to their customers, and saying that, if they would like this, that, or the other, they might not concede and put all those things in one particular machine, but they at least appear to be listening to what people are offering up. You've seen recently on some of them, in the case of artwork changes or something like that, where again there's a big fallout or a big pushback from from the collector community when they show an initial prototype type of artwork for a playfield or such, and that manufacturer will go back and say, we really can't do much about that. Yet 2 months later, you see a playfield that doesn't necessarily look completely different, but obviously they've heard the interests of their market and have tried to adjust accordingly to give something back to the people. They realize who their buyers are, and they don't want to put them out on an island by themselves. So they're saying, okay, we can't do everything that you want, we can't give you everything you want, but here, how about this? They're showing a willingness to work with the customer, and I think that's important in this day and age.
Yeah, I think it's been in a resurgence for, I would say, probably starting about 5 years ago. Pinball's been in a resurgence, and I still see it growing. I don't notice it really waning at all. And like I said before, it's a lot of younger kids I see that are pretty interested in it too, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, it's very vibrant right now. It's it's an odd kind of resurgence. It's resurging kind of like vinyl is in a resurgence. But it's only ever going to be maybe 5% of what it ever was. I mean, I'm not making a direct correlation there to pinball, but pinball's resurgence is very home-based, and if you're ever going to get back to 3 companies making 20,000 games each a year, you're going to have to get it back out on route, and I don't really see how to do that. I mean they're just, the places just aren't there anymore. There's no place for them to go. I mean, I have a hard time believing that's ever going to happen, but if it were to happen, if there's going to be that big of a resurgence, you'd have to get the people with dollars in their pockets putting the money into games on location. Otherwise, as a home market, I think it can be happy and healthy hobby and business for an extended period of time, but you'll never get back to 60,000 games a year being put into the market. To have like Gottlieb, Data East, Williams Ballet all putting out 3 or 4 titles a year, 5 to 9,000 units per game, and we are a long ways from that. But we are also a long ways from being almost completely dead in the water, like I'd say around 2007 when it seems like the bottom just sort of fell out. We're doing great compared to that.
A lot more people are buying pinball machines. A lot more people are opening up barcades, which are really cool, It's for, adults are 21 and over, and, they can go in and play the games they always wanted to play or liked when they were kids, and they also play the new stuff. They can drink beer. I don't know how many arcades there are, but I know in Portland. Okay, there's a barcade in Portland, Oregon that allows, kids under 21 to come in and play pinball all day. At night, they open up the bar, the kids have to go, and it's over 21 only.
I would say for the last couple of years it's been in a resurgence. At least when you look at bars, you look at arcades, you look at these areas that now have pinball machines that a handful of years ago wouldn't, or they would have had one rundown machine that was 20 or 30 years old or something like that. So I would say it's definitely, it appears to be in a resurgence because I'm hearing and seeing a lot more about it from and within areas that I wouldn't have before. I've heard as much of new places, even like something like Level 257, which you may have heard up in Schaumburg, which is a restaurant / arcade that's based on the Pac-Man game and that theme. But there's a handful of pinball machines there. Again, 5 or 6 years ago, even if they were building a restaurant based on Pac-Man, I don't know if you would have seen any pinball machines there. You might have seen a handful of arcade games, but there's also places like the Galloping Ghost, which is another, an arcade that has pinball machines, but this kind of resurgence of arcades and people wanting to get out and being able to play these large machines as opposed to just sitting at home on their consoles or on their computers. So I would absolutely say there's a resurgence.
I don't know where I see it. I mean, is it going to stay, is a lot of the allure of pinball the traditional format that it actually is, and you grow that part of it? Or do you say, no, pinball's about, LCD displays and hooking them up to the internet and having, real-time competitions, and I don't know.
Well, I think they'll continue to incorporate, some of the technology that makes things more effective. Can make stuff like, ball tracing and monitoring, and so they could have games where you could say that your ball's moving at, X amount of feet per second or something like that, and if you reach a certain range, you get extra points or something like that. So they can use optical and digital technology like that. I think the integration, obviously, of LCDs and stuff like colorful graphics. Animatronics, I would say, would continue to increase, and you'd see, toys that might be more complicated, at least from an outside perspective.
You can see some of there's companies that are trying to make digital copies or versions of pinball machines, trying to emulate it, make a video game type system that is more like video games, but is less physical, I guess. I don't know the best word. It's all computerized. There's no physical ball. There's no physical targets. I don't know how well that's going to hold up. I really think pinball is one of those things that is always going to be pinball. There might be different ways or different things that they may do, but I think it's still going to be a physical game. There's still going to be a ball. The way the game interacts with that ball may be a little bit different in coming down the road, but I really think that the physical part of pinball is really what attracts everybody to pinball, and I think the physical part of that's here to stay.
That it's much less about the machines than what the friendships I've gotten from the interaction of all these deals. I mean, I've literally probably 3 or 4 of my best friends, out of, let's say, 10, are probably from the pinball community. And a good portion of the time when we talk, we don't talk about pinball machines at all. Now we've become casual friends where, again, I'm asking about family, about kids going to school, about the car they just purchased, something like that. So it's the idea that you get beyond this peripheral type of friendship of where you're just talking about Bally Williams, Stern, Sega, any of these things where you get parts, this, that, or the other, and you're taking it to a completely different level of again, it becomes a more natural friendship. Just like people that meet up at a muscle car swap meet or something, and they both have interest in 69 Camaros, and they realize that. They start off talking about 69 Camaros, but 3 years from then, they're going to each other's weddings or kids' graduation or whatever because they're just friends.
Stare at you, your lights and sound. Am I scared of you? You could take me down like you said to do.